Somewhere in the dark, something enormous sits up. Its breathing is wrong. It has been asleep, and now it is not, and the thing that woke it was not a sound. In the text this comes from, the line is plain enough that you can feel the room. The sleep of their eyes fled from them. Two of them, brothers. They get up in the night, and they go and find the others, and they say out loud what they have just seen behind their eyes. They are giants. The book they are in is 4/5 destroyed, and what they saw in their sleep was the end of the world, described accurately about 150 years before the book of Daniel wrote the same vision down and became scripture. You know the sentence this comes from, Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. There were giants in the earth in those days. 4 verses of a story, and then the flood arrives and washes the subject away. For most of Christian history, that was the entire file. A rumor of monsters, left in the text like a torn edge. There was a whole book. We have pieces of it. And the astonishing thing in those pieces is not the size of the giants or the violence they do. It is that they are afraid. They know exactly what is coming, and one of them is called Gilgamesh. Give me 90 seconds on why any of this is real, because that is the part that decides whether the rest is worth your evening. In the winter of 1946, and through the years that followed, Bedouin and then archaeologists pulled tens of thousands of manuscript fragments out of 11 caves above the northwest shore of the Dead Sea, at a ruin called Qumran. Among the scraps, in caves 1, 2, 4, and 6, were fragments in Aramaic that nobody could place. They mentioned Enoch. They mentioned the Watchers. They named characters that appear in no Bible. The manuscripts have catalog numbers, and I will give them to you because they are how you check me. 1Q23, 1Q24, 2Q26, 4Q203, 4Q206, 4Q530, 4Q531, 4Q532, 4Q533, 6Q8. 10 manuscripts in all, on the reckoning of Lauren Stuckenbrook, whose 1997 critical edition is still the standard scholarly text. The copies themselves date from roughly the 1st century before the Common Era. The composition behind them is older, probably 3rd or 2nd century before the Common Era, which puts the writing of it in the same neighborhood as the oldest parts of 1st Enoch and earlier than Daniel. Józef Milik, the Polish priest and paleographer who spent decades on the Qumran Aramaic, is the man who worked out what they were. He published the identification in 1976, and he argued that this book had once traveled with 1st Enoch as part of the same collection. Now the proof I actually find convincing, because it does not depend on anyone's theory of Enoch. In 1943, 3 years before the first Dead Sea cave was opened, a German-born scholar named Walter Bruno Henning published fragments from a completely different world. They came from Turfan in the Tarim Basin, in what is now northwest China. They were Manichaean, written in Middle Persian and Sogdian and Uyghur, and they were the remains of a scripture of Mani's church called the Book of Giants. 30 years later, the Aramaic scraps from a cave in Judea and the Iranian scraps from a ruined library on the edge of the Gobi turned out to be the same composition, same characters, same dreams, same structure. That is what a real text looks like when you find one. 2 copies, 5,000 kilometers apart, 1,000 years apart, with nobody on either end able to coordinate the forgery. Here is what I want you to hold on to while we go through it, and it is the reason I keep coming back to this particular ruin of a book. Out of everything in these fragments, one line survives more or less whole. It is spoken by a monster, It is the single most human sentence in the entire literature of the Watchers, and by the end of this, you will understand why it has stayed with me for months. We will get to it last. One more thing about the physical evidence, so you know what we are actually working from. Cave 4 at Qumran gave up something close to 15,000 fragments belonging to more than 500 separate manuscripts. Not scrolls, fragments. Many of them are smaller than a thumbnail, dark as old tea, and carry 3 or 4 Aramaic letters. For decades, they lay on glass-topped tables in a room in Jerusalem that everyone called the scrollery, and the work was jigsaw work. Match a fiber, match a hand, match a spacing, and hope. The Book of Giants was assembled out of that. Nobody found a book. People found crumbs and worked out, over 50 years, that the crumbs belonged together. Millick made the identification in 1976. Stuckenbrook produced the full critical edition in 1997. Emil Puech published the official edition of the Cave 4 Aramaic in the Discoveries in the Judean Desert series in 2001. 3 generations of scholars, 1 ruined book. Which means every sentence I am about to quote is a reconstruction, and the honest ones are printed with brackets around the holes. Start with who these creatures are, because Genesis will not tell you. The Watchers are the 200 angels of 1 Enoch chapter 6 who come down onto Mount Hermon, take human wives, and teach humanity metalwork, cosmetics, weapons, and sorcery. Their sons are the giants. Genesis gives them one word, Nephilim, and moves on. Enoch gives them a body count. The Book of Giants gives them names, brothers, an assembly, a court, and a psychology. 2 names dominate, Ohyah and Hahyah, sons of Shemihazah, who is the leader of the 200, and a third who does the running, Mahaweh, son of Barakel, the messenger. There is even a roster. One of the fragments of 4Q203 preserves what looks like a list of names, set out the way a scribe sets out a census. A book about monsters that keeps a register of them. And before the dreams start, we should be clear about what these creatures have been doing, because the text does not soften it, and neither should I. In 1st Enoch, which is the companion volume, the giants consume everything the human world produces, then turn on the animals, then on each other, then on people. The line that ends that passage is the one that sets the whole judgment in motion. The earth brought accusation against the lawless ones. Not the victims, the ground. That is the situation when the 2 brothers wake up in the night. They are not a mob in this book. They are a family with a problem. Read the fragments in sequence, and a court scene assembles itself out of the holes. There is an assembly of the giants. There is speech, formal and public. Somebody stands up and reports. Somebody argues. There is the sense of a hall, and of people in that hall who have started to understand that the situation is worse than they were told. What set it off is a dream. 2 dreams on the same night to 2 brothers. Hahyah goes first. He tells his in the assembly, out loud, to everyone. He saw a garden. Gardeners were working it, watering it, and out of it came 200 trees. Then the water came, and the fire came with it, and the garden was destroyed. What remained standing, when the water went down, was 1 tree with 3 of its shoots. Look at the arithmetic. 200 trees, 200 watchers came down Hermon. The garden is their offspring, and every one of them is watered and grown and then burned and drowned in the same event. And of that entire plantation there is 1 survivor with 3 shoots, a man and his 3 sons. Nobody in the room has to be told what that means. The listener does not have to be told either. That is the craft in this text. The dream is transparent, and the horror is that the dreamer keeps hoping it is not. Then Ohyah tells his. He saw a tablet thrown into water. It sank, and it came up again, and the writing on it had been washed. What remained legible were 3 names. 2 dreams, 1 message, delivered twice in one night to 2 brothers, so that neither of them can dismiss it as indigestion. 3 shoots, 3 names. Now here is where the book does the thing that made me want an entire episode on it. The assembly of the giants cannot interpret the dreams. They are the strongest creatures that have ever walked on the earth, and they sit in a hall arguing about the meaning of a garden, and they get nowhere. So they take a decision that tells you everything about their situation. They send for Enoch. Enoch, in this literature, is the man who walked with God and did not die. In 1 Enoch, he has already been to the Watchers once, carrying a verdict they did not want. He is a human being. He is their father's judge. And the giants, unable to read their own nightmares, appoint a messenger to go and find him and ask. Mahawe is the one who goes. The flight is one of the best preserved passages in the whole book, and it reads like something out of a much later century. He rises into the air. He crosses the desert. He goes over the wilderness like a whirlwind, using his hands the way a bird uses wings. And the fragments have him passing over the wasteland and then coming down where Enoch is. Somewhere in that journey there is a detail I cannot stop thinking about. Mahawe calls out, and Enoch, on hearing him, tells him not to be afraid. The angel-born monster, sent by an assembly of monsters, is comforted by the one small mortal who is not afraid of any of them. Enoch listens to the dreams. Then he does something specific, and the specificity is why this book matters for the history of writing. He does not deliver an oracle out loud. He writes. The answer goes back on tablets, in his own hand, as a letter. 4Q203 preserves the opening formula of it, a copy of the second tablet of the letter, written by the hand of Enoch, the distinguished scribe. Somebody in the 3rd or 2nd century before the Common Era imagined divine judgment arriving as correspondence, sealed in 2 copies carried by a courier. The verdict, as far as the ruined columns let us read it, is what you would expect and worse. The dreams are exactly what they look like. The garden is their father's work. The flood is real. The judgment has already been decided, and the decision was made before the dream was sent. The Enochic literature has a formula for this that runs through 1 Enoch like a refrain, delivered to the watchers themselves. There will be no peace for you. Sit with the design of that. God does not send the dream to warn them. He sends it to inform them. And then comes the passage that should be far more famous than it is. In 4Q530, one of the giants describes a vision, and it is not a garden. He sees the ruler of heaven come down to the earth. Thrones are set up. The great Holy One sits. Hundreds of hundreds serve him. Thousands of thousands stand before him. Books are opened. Judgment is spoken. If that sounds familiar, it should. It is Daniel chapter 7. Thrones were placed. The Ancient of Days took his seat. Thousands ministered to him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. Daniel chapter 7 is one of the load-bearing walls of the New Testament. The Son of Man comes on the clouds out of that chapter. Every trial scene in the Gospels where Jesus answers the high priest is quoting it. And here is the same throne room, the same opened books, the same countless attendants in an Aramaic text that is probably older, seen in a dream by a monster. I am going to be careful with that, because it is the kind of claim that gets oversold. The dating of these manuscripts is a scholarly argument and not a settled fact, and the relationship could run in more than one direction. Daniel drawing on this imagery, this book drawing on a common stock of throne vision language, or both drinking from the same older well. What is beyond argument is that the imagery is shared, and that our copy of it in the Book of Giants is very early. The nightmare of a giant and the vision of a prophet are the same picture. There is a second thing worth noticing about Enoch's role here, and it runs forward for centuries. In Genesis, Enoch gets one verse and a disappearance. He walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. 22 words in the King James, and no explanation. Everything else about him was built later, in books like this one. And the job these books give him is oddly specific. He is not primarily a preacher. He is a reader. He reads the heavens. He reads the calendar. He reads dreams. And above all, he writes what he reads down. The Book of Giants calls him the distinguished scribe. Later Jewish tradition will take that role and run with it until, in the mystical literature, the man who kept the records has become the angel who keeps them. You can watch a job description turn into a being. That transformation starts here, in a book about monsters, with a courier standing in front of a small old man asking what a garden means. Now, the detail that turns this from a curiosity into something genuinely disorienting. Among the names of the giants in these fragments, in Aramaic spelled out, is Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, the hero of the oldest long poem that survives in any language, 2/3 God and 1/3 man, who walks to the end of the world looking for the secret of not dying and comes back without it. In the Book of Giants, he is not a hero. He is one of the monsters, sitting in that hall, listening to a dream about a garden. And with him, in the same fragments, a name written roughly as Holbabish. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Humbaba is the guardian of the cedar forest. The creature Gilgamesh and Enkidu go out to kill. Understand what the writer has done. Mesopotamia's national epic, the founding literature of the civilization that had ruled and deported and dominated the Jews for centuries, has been taken apart and reassembled. Its heroes have been reclassified as the illegitimate children of fallen angels, awaiting a flood they cannot survive. It is a piece of literary demolition carried out by a colonized people against their occupiers' mythology, and it is sitting in a cave in Judea. There is a flood in the Gilgamesh epic too, told by a survivor called Utnapishtim, who was given a boat and lived. In the Book of Giants, Gilgamesh does not get the boat, and there is one more layer under that, which is why I keep calling this a demolition rather than a borrowing. The Gilgamesh epic is a poem about a man who cannot accept that he will die. He loses his friend. He refuses the loss. He walks to the edge of the world. He finds the plant that restores youth, and a snake eats it while he is bathing. He goes home with nothing except the walls of his city, and the poem ends by telling you to look at how well the walls are built. Whoever wrote the Book of Giants read that, and they put its hero in a room with a dream about a garden that gets burned, and gave him no walls at all. The Mesopotamian answer to mortality is the city you leave behind. This book's answer is that there is a throne, and books are opened at it, and nothing you built is admissible. Two civilizations arguing through the same character. I said earlier that this is the point where a channel like this usually starts talking about what the church hid. This one does not, and this episode is a good place to explain why the honest answer is more interesting. The Book of Giants was never in a canon. There is no council that struck it, no bishop who burned it, no list it fell off. What happened to it is worse in a way, because it is the thing that actually kills books. It went out of use. Slowly, for reasons that had nothing to do with its contents. 3 of those reasons are documented. The first is language. This book was written in Aramaic for a Jewish readership, inside a specific school of apocalyptic writing that produced First Enoch and Jubilees. When that school lost its audience after the destruction of the temple in the year 70 and the catastrophes that followed, the whole shelf went quiet at once. Rabbinic Judaism, rebuilding, had no use for a literature of angel-fathered monsters. The rabbis were consolidating around law and interpretation, and a book about Gilgamesh's nightmares had nowhere to sit. The second is that it traveled with Enoch, and Enoch's fortunes decided its own. The Ethiopian Church kept First Enoch and kept it in its Bible to this day. Every other branch of Christianity let it go. Wherever Enoch was dropped, the Book of Giants had already been dropped, because it was the more marginal partner in the pair. The third reason is the one that finished it, and it is the most interesting thing that ever happened to this text. In the 3rd century of the Common Era, in Mesopotamia, a man named Mani founded a religion. He wrote its scriptures himself, deliberately, which almost no founder does. He assembled a canon of his own, a small fixed set of books, and he wanted it universal, translated, copied, carried by missionaries from the Roman Empire to China. And into that canon, Mani put the Book of Giants. He rewrote it for his own cosmology. The giants took Persian names, Sam and Nariman, out of the Iranian epic tradition. The fallen angels became demonic powers escaped from their prisons in the sky, and the 4 archangels who put them down became the ordered forces of light. Then his missionaries took it east: Sogdian, Middle Persian, Uyghur, Chinese. It ended up in a library at Turfan on the Silk Road, at the far edge of everything, where it sat until a German expedition dug it out at the start of the 20th century, and Henning read it in 1943. That is how a Jewish apocalypse from a Judean cave ends up in a Buddhist-adjacent monastic library in the Tarim Basin. Now consider what that did to the book's reputation in the West. Manichaeism became, for the Roman Church, the definitive heresy. Augustine had been a Manichaean hearer for 9 years before his conversion, and spent the rest of his life writing against them. Manichaean was the accusation you threw at an enemy when you wanted him finished. Imperial laws were written specifically to hunt them. And here is a text that the arch-heretic personally canonized. No council needed to condemn the Book of Giants. Its association was enough. A book that is one of the 7 scriptures of the most hunted heresy in the empire does not get copied by careful Christian scribes who would like to keep their libraries. That is the removal, and there is no cover-up in it anywhere. A book fell out of a language, then out of a collection, then into the hands of the wrong sponsor. 3 ordinary forces, none of them a plot. And after 1,000 years, the only copies left in the world were fragments in a cave nobody had opened and fragments in a desert library nobody had visited. Which brings me to the line. I promised you at the beginning that one sentence survives in this book more or less intact, and that it is the most human thing in it. It is in 4Q 531. A giant is speaking. The text around him is destroyed. What he says is this. He says that he is a giant, and that by the strength of his arm and by his own great power he could take on anyone alive, and he has made war against them. And then, I am not able to stand against them, for my opponents dwell in heaven, and they live in the holy places. Read it again slowly, because there are 3 things in it. He is not lying about his strength. In the world of the text, he really is unbeatable. He has really fought and really won. He knows precisely, without being told, what he is up against and where they live, and he has already lost. The sentence is in the present tense. He is not describing a defeat that has happened. He is describing his understanding, arrived at in the middle of his own life, at the height of his power, in the dark, after a dream, that everything he is good at is irrelevant to the only fight that will decide anything. That is not a monster's line. Nobody in the ancient world put that sentence in the mouth of a creature they simply wanted the reader to hate. It is the whole architecture of the book in one breath. The strongest things that ever lived, receiving accurate information about their own end, unable to read it without help, sending a courier across the world to a small mortal man for a translation they already understood, and being answered on tablets with the one word that runs through all of this literature: no peace. I have spent a long time now in the books that got left outside, and this one changed what I think they are for. We tend to read the excluded texts looking for the doctrine somebody wanted suppressed. In this case, there is no doctrine to suppress. There is a piece of writing, older than most of the Bible's later parts, in which the villains of Genesis are given an interior life, a family, a legal assembly, a night of bad sleep, and the dignity of understanding their own sentence. The tablet in Ohyah's dream came up out of the water with the writing washed off it and 3 names left. Our tablets came up out of a cave in about the same condition. Scraps in a wooden box in Jerusalem, brown, brittle, unreadable, sitting for years while a small number of people worked out that they belonged to a book. What survives of the Book of Giants would fit on a few pages. Everything I have told you tonight has been reconstructed from that, and from a second ruined copy of the same book that a Silk Road merchant carried east. Both tablets went into the water. Both came up with most of the writing gone, and what was still legible on both of them at opposite ends of the world was the same handful of names. There is one more thing about Enoch's letter, and it has bothered me since I first read the fragment. Every account of it says the same phrase, the second tablet. Somewhere behind our text there was a first one. We have never found it. That is where we go next.